other people weren't able to testify. But with these people, they were able to use people salacious. By the way, and nothing ever happened. There was no anything. Nothing ever happened.
And there it is, one of the most effective speakers in American history, Donald Trump. I have much more to show you from this absolutely off the walls, out of control Donald Trump losing grip as he's speaking to reporters in New York City, responding this morning to the news that he has been convicted of 34 felony counts. He is a convicted felon, Donald Trump. That will henceforth be how I refer to Trump, convicted felon Donald Trump. And there he says they were able to use people salacious. By the way, nothing ever happened. There was no anything. Really compelling the audience, as you can tell. Then you have him attacking a violation of his gag order, Michael Cohen.
Again, if I wrote down and paid a lawyer, and by the way, this was a highly qualified lawyer. Now, I'm not allowed to use his name because of the gag order. But, you know, he's a sleazebag. Everybody knows that. Took me a while to find out. But he was effective. He did work. But he wasn't a fixer. He was a lawyer. You know, they like to use the word fixer. He wasn't a fixer. He was a lawyer. At the time, he was a fully accredited lawyer.
I know Trump is often scatterbrained, but he was more discombobulated in this press conference than I've seen him in a very long time. And in a sense, you understand why he would be this discombobulated. And he's gotten the news that he's been dreading for who knows how long, years probably. And so he's just frantically trying to respond. And I can't give you a sense of this entire press conference. I'll show you clips, like I said. But as I was watching the full thing as it was going on, the way he just sort of jumped from topic to topic and was all over the place and was so irritated and then would get distracted by something was Trump in a form, like I said, you rarely see him, even with his struggles normally, delivering these sorts of remarks. But he really is impacted. Some people try to portray him as not being too emotionally impacted by this crazy, incredible news, but horrible for him. And he's definitely impacted and struggling to process the news. And that was definitely emphasized in watching just sort of the full thing uninterrupted. But here's another moment.
Would have testified. I wanted to testify. The theory is you never testify because as soon as you testify, anybody, if it were George Washington, don't testify because they'll get you on something that you said slightly wrong and then they sue you for perjury. But I didn't care about that. I wanted to. But the judge allowed them to go into everything that I was ever involved in, not this case, everything that I was ever involved in, which is a first. In other words, you could go into every single thing that I ever did. Was he a bad boy here? Was he a bad boy there? And my lawyer said, what do you need to go through? And all you wanted to do is testify simply on this case. Because I would have loved to have testified. To this day, I would have liked to have testified. But you would have said something out of whack, like it was a beautiful sunny day and it was actually raining out. And I very much appreciate the big crowd of people outside. That's incredible what's happening.
He's literally like a dog getting distracted by a squirrel. And, oh, there's some people out there. Hi. What was I saying? Oh, yeah. I wanted to testify, but I wasn't allowed to. But I was allowed to be clear. But my lawyer said don't. But I said I don't care if they said don't. I was going to testify because I could come and destroy this whole case. But I chose not to. But I would still like to. Can we get them all again? I actually do want to go testify. But I didn't want to testify because even if I were George Washington, which in a sense hey everybody, I am George Washington, is what I was going to say. Or Abraham Lincoln. I think I'm better than both of them, actually. But I wouldn't perjure myself because I only tell the truth. But they would have gotten me on something. They would have gone into my past, which is fine. My past is fine. So it would have been fine if they went in my past. But they would have found something, made up something. Okay, you get the point. Just very, very discombobulated. Here's more. Him improperly using the word literally, which drives me crazy.
As far as the trial itself, it was very unfair. We weren't allowed to use our election expert under any circumstances. You saw what happened to some of the witnesses that were on our side. They were literally crucified by this man who looks like an angel, but he's really a devil. He looks so nice and soft. People say, oh, he seems like such a nice man. No, unless you saw him in action. And you saw that with a certain witness that went through hell.
All right. Literally, no one was literally crucified in this case, okay? No. Stop it. With that, he also glitched through one of those words. But that's okay again. He is dealing with some tough news. We'd all be a little bit distraught. And it just happens to be slightly entertaining to observe his distraught nature. Then you have more.
They didn't want him to testify. That's why he went to jail. They put him in jail twice. He's 77 years old. Now, normally I'd say that's an old guy, but I don't feel 77. Nobody ever says that about me. I'd like them to say, gee, we have to have a little sorrow for this man, because they just don't say that about me. But maybe I'm better off that way. I think I'm probably better off that way. But they put him in.
Yeah, let's get back to the topic. You were trying to talk about Weisselberg. And, he's an old man being put in jail. But he's my age. So never mind, he's not an old man. But I wish they would have pity on me for being old, which I'm not old. I'm handsome. I don't lather on this much makeup because I'm insecure about my aging. I'm fresh as a daisy. People show Biden at the beach shirtless. You should see me shirtless. But I'm not going to show you because they're going to catch me on something. They'll say I perjured myself being shirtless. I'm not, by the way, I'm referring to Trump has constantly ranted as a hair is attacking my eyeball. Has constantly ranted about how he doesn't think Biden looks good on the beach whenever Biden is snapped on the beach shirtless. It's a very strange obsession of Trump. And at one point he said his body is better than Joe Biden's, which just really underlines the childish nature of Trump. Here's more.
Went through one of many experiences where we had a conflicted judge, highly conflicted. There's never been a more conflicted judge. Now, I'm under a gag order, which nobody's ever been under. No presidential candidate's ever been under a gag order before. I'm under a gag order, nasty gag order, where I've had to pay thousands of dollars in penalties and fines and was threatened with jail.
It is so. I know we've discussed his strange and incoherent way of delivering remarks, but this particular press conference is really reminding me he can't just say a sentence, because whatever it is about how he feels like he has to deliver messages, he has to plug in sort of hyperbole in as many places as possible. So instead of going, I'm under a gag order, and that has led to me being threatened with penalties, even jail, which is so unfair. Instead, it has to be, I'm under a gag order, which no one's ever been under a gag order. Like, it's a nasty, horrible, brutal, vicious gag order. And it was placed on me by a judge, and that judge is vicious and nasty and terrible. It just stretches out so long, how long it takes him to get to the end of a thought. And they want to send me to a jail, and it's going to be the worst, the likes of which no one's ever seen. And people are saying this is the worst injustice in the history of the world. What was I talking about? Here's more.
But the three things that he pled on, having to do with the election and having to do essentially a little bit with me, they weren't crimes. They weren't crimes. Nor is paying money under an NDA. So we have an NDA, non-disclosure agreement. It's a big deal, a non-disclosure agreement. Totally honorable, totally good, totally accepted. Everybody has them. Every company has non-disclosure agreements. But the press called it slush fund and all sorts of other things. Hush money, hush money. It's not hush money. It's called a non-disclosure agreement. And most of the people in this room have a non-disclosure agreement with their company. It's a disgrace. So it's not hush money. It's a non-disclosure agreement, totally legal, totally common. Everyone has it.
So obviously, a nightmare. But I want to bring in our legal expert, Aaron Parnas. The first time Aaron and I are having a chance to speak since the big news that Donald Trump is now a convicted felon. Before getting into some questions and breaking down for the audience what we should expect from here, I do want to just get your take on the news itself.
Yeah, Luke, I mean, the justice system worked. It worked the way it was supposed to. You had 12 jurors of 12 peers of Donald Trump's convict him beyond a reasonable doubt on 34 felony charges. They reviewed the evidence. They took 12 hours. They asked for readbacks. They reviewed the instructions multiple times. The justice system worked the way it was supposed to. It's a sad day that a former president had to face criminal charges and is now a convicted felon, but nobody's above the law. So the justice system worked.
Yeah, and sometimes you'll hear MAGA folks say that it's horrible that positivity is being expressed by some people, or even celebratory language is being used, or people are making the face that I'm making while talking about this. And they'll say essentially what you said, this is a sad day. And the way that I've worded it before is the wrongs are sad when we talk about any of the different violations of the law by Trump. That's sad that we have someone as powerful as him who's still coalescing support in one of the two major parties, who was a former president, who did all the things that are bad that he did. It's perfectly acceptable, at least in my mind, to have some positive feelings about then someone being held accountable for the wrong thing. So it's bad that he did the things, but good, like you said, that justice prevailed. But I do want to get a sense. So now we move to sentencing. Explain how that process plays out and when it plays out.
Yeah, so sentencing is scheduled for July 11th at 11 a.m. in the same courthouse in front of Justice Merchan again. And over the next couple months, what you're going to see is DA Alvin Bragg is going to submit his sentencing recommendation. He's likely going to ask for some incarceration. Todd Blanche is going to submit Donald Trump's response to that, likely asking for some sort of probationary sentence or community service or something like that, or potentially even just a fine. So we'll see what those kind of say. In the meantime, Donald Trump's going to be meeting with a New York probation officer. They're going to conduct what is called a pre-sentence investigation. And probation is going to provide their recommendation for what a sentence should be in this case. Donald Trump is facing up to 4 years in New York State prison on each of the 34 counts, but they're going to merge and he will face a total of 4 years for all of the 34 counts. But he is a first-time offender. These are nonviolent offenses. It would be highly unlikely that he gets anywhere close to 4 years, let alone getting jail time. It is possible that he may get jail time, especially given the fact that he has zero to no, in fact, negative remorse in this case. He's attacked Justice Merchan. He's violated the gag order, which Merchan is allowed to consider when sentencing. So it's possible he gets some type of incarceration sentence, but it won't be that long.
And you're saying it's completely and totally up to the discretion of the judge?
It is. And during the course of the criminal trial, you saw Judge Merchan say on multiple occasions that the last thing he wants to do is jail Donald Trump, given the fact that Trump is a former president and could very well be America's next president and is running for president right now. And also given all the complexities behind Secret Service and him serving time behind bars and the security concerns. I mean, it's just, there are a whole host of issues. So I think the last thing Judge Merchan wants to do is jail Trump. But the more Trump baits Merchan, the more likely, in my opinion, he gets some type of incarceration sentence, especially considering the fact that Trump is not going to start serving any sentence until well after the November election. So theoretically, he could be sentenced to, let's say, 9 months in New York jail. And after appeals, he won't even start serving that sentence until 2025, 2026, or potentially until after he leaves the White House if he's elected in November.
Goodness gracious, crazy to contemplate. One of the questions I see going around a lot, and it is a fascinating thing to think about, is now that he's a convicted felon, can he vote for himself?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question. The answer is it depends. So he's registered to vote in Florida, where he currently resides. And the way Florida's voter registration laws work are that they defer to what kind of the state in which the conviction occurs. So here it's New York. So if Donald Trump is incarcerated on the day of the November 5th election, he will not be able to vote for himself. Incarcerated individuals in New York are not allowed to vote. But if he is not incarcerated or he has already served his sentence or the sentence has stayed pending appeal, he will be able to vote for himself. So right now he can vote. If he is incarcerated on election day, he will not be able to vote though.
You know, there would be something universally profound about Trump being charged with voter fraud because he votes for himself when he's not allowed to after all of his voter fraud. We found the voter fraud. It was Donald J. Trump. And then what does the appeal process look like, the timeline, which we expect there?
Yeah, so in New York, you can't appeal a conviction or sentence until after a sentence is imposed. So I would expect the same day that the sentence is imposed on July 11th or shortly thereafter, Todd Blanche will file what is called a notice of appeal. That appeal will then go up to the First District Court of Appeals in New York, and then eventually to the New York through the New York appellate system, and potentially all the way to the United States Supreme Court. It's going to take several months, if not at least a year, before any resolution on the appeals process is concluded, especially given the fact that Donald Trump has some viable appellate arguments. I don't think they'll be successful, but they are viable. He can argue that he didn't receive a fair trial given the fact that it was held in Manhattan and all the publicity surrounding it in that city. He could argue that the prior bad acts about Karen McDougal and the doorman were allowed in to the trial when the indictment didn't really talk about them. He could also argue that some of the cross-examination questions that Donald Trump could have been asked had he testified regarding the sexual abuse case and E. Jean Carroll and things like that were improper. So he has a number of appellate issues, and honestly, it's a stronger case on appeal than it was in the trial court, but still, I don't expect it to go well for Trump.
Very interesting. Well, we'll, of course, be following it every step of the way with Aaron, and on that, Aaron, where can people find you?
On all my social platforms, just at Aaron Parnas.